Going to be doing a deep dive, but let's start in time-honored tradition with a bit of an elevator pitch. If you all wouldn't mind just sharing with the audience a bit about who you are and what you do. And we're going to start with yourself, Ciara. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Oisin. So good morning, everybody. My name is Ciara Nicliam, and I am the Commercial Director for Gaming at Betsson Group. We operate multiple brands in jurisdictions all over the world, and my job is to work with my team, the commercial teams, the product teams, and ensure that we have the best customer experience and the end-to-end journeys on our site.
Fantastic. And over to your good self, Amy.
Thank you. I'm Amy Casson-Hughes. I'm the Director of Customer Experience at Eyas Gaming, and we're essentially responsible for building out the best experience for our players across our websites and apps.
Wonderful. And Andy, come on down. Tell us a bit about what you do.
Hi, hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Andy Rogers, I'm the CEO of Rokker and the Rokker Network. We're a group of professional services companies that point at the gaming industry. And my day job in Rokker is working with lots of operators and suppliers on their strategic imperative.
Wonderful. And coming over to yourself, Simon, talk to us a bit about what's happening at Relax Gaming.
Morning, everybody. Simon Hammon, Chief Product Officer for Relax Gaming. We're a studio in our own right, and also an aggregator of multiple different casino content partners. Been in the B2B side of the business for coming on nearly 15 years now. So I've seen a lot of change in the business, and look forward to talk about the future.
Fantastic. And Simon, I'd love to stay with yourself maybe. If we could just open things up and have a look at the current environment. So as I mentioned in the kind of opening blurb, we've got a new world, new customer expectations. We've got Zoomers, and they want that joined up user experience, that customer experience. We live in a world of very fast moving customer behavior and expectations. What does this mean for content, future content gaps? Talk to us a bit about the current environment and what that means for content producers.
I think it's fair to say that the market has changed significantly in the last 2 years. We have more suppliers than we've ever had before, more content available to the player bases than ever before, a lot more challenges than we've ever had before with regulation, distribution, visibility. So there's lots of things that are affecting both strategic direction and output of a supplier. We're in a very competitive landscape. Content is certainly king. There's an argument that to some degree content is also becoming a degree of a commodity. And this is where the challenge has become from a supplier to ensure that content is still king and high performance, innovative content still makes a high impact. So we're in a state of heavy margin pressure, heavy competition, and the quality needs to shine through, as does innovation, to even have a chance of performing and generating decent ROI. So it's tougher times for the supplier side of the business. The cut through is tougher.
Yeah, we live in a world where we have this kind of Netflix mentality. As you say, content has become possibly a bit commoditized, and that kind of opens up new challenges, etc. But Ciara, I'd like to come over to yourself now. Obviously, you've got a very distinct view. You've got a lot of experience in the sector. Talk to us a bit about how the differing markets affect things like content generation and content production. And, we've got Greece, Italy, traditional markets. We've got the UK and Scandinavia. All of these things, folks like yourself have to take into account. You have to spin these plates and juggle all the different expectations. How do you navigate this? What do you think the overview is of the sector in this way?
Yeah, I think for us it very much depends on whether it is a new, more, emerging market or quite a mature market as well. So markets like Scandinavia, customers typically tend to know what they're looking for, and you need to help them on that search and that selection journey, whereas a lot of our emerging markets, so if we look at some of the new markets that we have, or markets like Peru where we're growing really strongly, then, that's about holding that customer's hand and reassuring them along the way, because it's maybe not something they're as used to. Even that e-commerce exposure and everything in Latin America is quite low. So, when we select content at Betsson, we have over 5,500 different versions of games that we maintain just on our in-house platform. But, that doesn't mean you'll find a single website that has more than 2,000-3,000 games on them. And that's because, we need to cater for a wide audience, and the content that works well in the UK might work in Greece, for example, where it's, you know, a more traditional betting audience, but it might not get the same cut through in some of the other markets that we have. So we need to make sure there's a wide variety of content. And actually, when you think about the input and the effort required to test and configure and launch content and do commercial deals with partners, it's better to have the content if someone searches for it than to lose the customer potentially. So one of the big things we focus on is failed searches. So we look at a lot of that customer journey, and we get a report every week that talks about customers who searched and used our search and filter functionalities and didn't result in a game launch, and we try and really optimize that process all the way through.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ciara. Okay, very, very interesting. And Andy, coming over to yourself. Now, I know you've got some, you know, a good insider view of things like the Apple ecosystem. You've got some strong opinions on fiefdoms or gatekeepers. Talk to us a bit about, you know, the kind of tension between open ecosystems and walled gardens. Where do you think this is going to go? What do you think it means for the industry? And what advice do you have for our delegates here?
It's a really good question. I mean, we've all seen, you know, the changes in obviously the Apple rules over the last year or so. So, I mean, what we're seeing is lots of different platforms, basically, you know, opportunities, and whether it's traditional, you know, operator sites or apps, or whether it's new, you know, worlds like Twitch or even OTT. Services on TV or streams, you know, for people like DAZN or whoever, you know, there's lots of different opportunities, and as you say, rightly so, that creates fiefdoms of some kind and gatekeepers, and that just means that, you know, there's another level of complexity to deal with, you know, over and above the sort of market saturation and the regulatory pressures. You also have this technology pressure, and effectively what you're leading to is a much more granular. A much more granular service offering. You know, your products are designed and consumed by an audience that's disparate over a whole bunch of channels, and that's really interesting. You know, so when you talk about, you know, diminishing margins, like Simon, you know, mentioned, and you know, the cost of getting products to market, what does that mean if you're dealing with, you know, ever more granular audience segments? And really, what that means is that we all need to be, you know, broadly better at targeting, understanding our consumer, understanding where they are, and ensuring that there's the right level of product and the right type of product in the hands of the right type of consumer at that point. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you were talking there about the changing nature of consumers, changing demographics. So I'd love to come over to yourself, Amy. Now, talk to us a bit from your perspective about how the customer experience has changed, say, in the last 10 years. What things have you noticed? You know, what observations do you have on Gen Zs, and what does it mean for iGaming?
I think, particularly with younger audiences, they're less patient. They want, you know, always on, constantly engaged, bite-sized content. With services like Twitch and things, you're kind of TikTok, you're mixing the kind of reality TV style with like podcast and video gaming, and that's the kind of expectations that people have today. If you take customer experience within our industry, I think 10 years ago it was shockingly poor, and now we're kind of waking up to the fact that we can't really be that behind the rest of the industry anymore. And we've seen, you know, radical improvements, which has been great. I still think there's a way to go around not just having products that are very usable. You know, we need to bring in other improvements like personalization and things like that. But I think what we've seen over the last few years is that the impact of UX changes actually becomes smaller as time has gone on, because 10 years ago you would do a big UX overhaul and it would have a dramatic impact on the product because there were so many products out there that were so poor, whereas now customers' expectations are that you get good UX. So we're in more of this mode of kind of optimizing the existing product that we've got to benefit from these small changes. However, it's still absolutely critical to keep optimizing because people expect a seamless customer journey, and we have to help customers kind of get the task at hand done.
Yeah, totally. And staying with yourself, talk to us a bit about the role of operators. They have this quite tricky balancing act because the Gen Zs, the Zoomers, they expect personalization wherever they go. They expect a joined-up user experience. But how can operators personalize across multiple providers? What kind of techniques are there? Any advice? Is it possible at the moment for this personalization to exist in these multiple places that the Gen Zs are enjoying games?
I think personalization is definitely becoming more of a factor in our industry, but I think a lot of people still get away without any personalization. But I'm sure that will dramatically change over the next few years. I think if you've got operators doing no personalization in a few years' time, I'll be surprised if they're still doing well. I think, and it's not just it's personalized gaming content. There's also personalized promotions, personalized search results. There's so many aspects that you could kind of introduce into the product.
Indeed. And coming over to yourself, Ciara, what kind of, we heard about personalization, joined up user experience, etc. What kind of, UX factors would you bring into the mix to meet the changing expectations of the Gen Zs? Is there anything that you've observed on different platforms, like maybe free to play? Or you mentioned you were at an airport a little while ago when we caught up, and you said you were kind of downloading the Apple Arcade. What do you think the industry should be learning from other players in the space?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the first thing is ease of use. At any one point, I mean, at Betsson, we are a predominantly mobile operator. We are mobile first in many ways, and at any point someone is one swipe on a home screen away from leaving your site and playing with the competition. So when we look at things like engagement from the free to play space, absolutely, and it doesn't need to be free bonuses and free offers and promotions, but reasons to play. And I think very much now as an operator, your job isn't to exist as a website and host games anymore. We're not the poker pages of the early 2000s where you just needed a big red button that said click here to play. It's about bringing them on that journey, that search, that selection, and how you bring that forward, and also in the content that we choose, right? I think in many ways our industry is probably not very well set up for innovation in terms of regulation and even regulator understanding of different content, but whether it's skill-based gaming or if it's multiplayer approaches, and I'm really looking forward to hearing people speak about that over the next few days as well, because I think they're some of the really interesting things that are starting to come into the space that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there's no better place to be learning about this next generation of content design, user experience design than right here at iGaming Next. And I too am very much looking forward to all of that, Ciara. So coming back to yourself, Simon, now you mentioned earlier about, the next generation of content. Talk to us a bit about Content 2.0. Does this tie in with streamers? Does it tie in with affiliates? It sounds like a world of opportunity is opening up here, but there might be some dangers in there as well. Talk to us about that.
Sure. Quite a multifaceted question.
Yes.
There's already been quite a dramatic content shift, I think, in the last few years. Although on the surface, you probably wouldn't see it. You're already seeing a great depart from the traditional 5x3, low, medium, casual, volatile games. Those don't work anymore. No one's interested in them. They don't play well. They don't really financially perform. So suppliers who are actually having high performance or actually showcasing high performance are the ones who are daring to challenge that. So you're seeing a lot of new real configs. You're seeing a lot of more high volatile structures which tie into that kind of big win potential streamer kind of focus. So you're already getting content that is changing its style, its mechanical flow and game flow to target the high impact, sort of low attention span new player, because we're trying to all capture the player's imagination in a much shorter period of time. And this is where the streamer and affiliate community has tied in quite significantly into that. But that said, I think if you look at what's really standing out in both probably operator performance and also supplier performance, it's the games that do look different. It's the ones that have a unique mechanic, unique real configs and all these types of things, and the ones that are trying to push the envelope of what a slot is. I don't think the successful games anymore resemble anything like a slot. used to, even just a couple of years ago. So this will be an evolutionary change. I think it's happened more aggressively in the last year or two because of the economics of running a studio and the positioning and the competition element. So I think that is already forcing change. There is a very real scenario there where it's, for any studio, it's a tough environment. There's never been an easier way to get to market through, dare I say, people like Relax, for a young studio or a studio looking for distribution, but ultimately the content needs to perform. So in one sense, the barriers of entry have come down because of aggregators like us, but still the performance metric or the pressure on performance has never been so high. So you need to dare to innovate, otherwise you won't stand out from the crowd, you won't get the compounded revenue you need to support your operation. That puts quite a bit of pressure on suppliers to come out with something new. It is therefore, by nature, more of a risky element, of course, because by trialing something new and exciting doesn't necessarily mean it's going to resonate with the players here and now. And that can have a dramatic impact on your sustainability. But you're already seeing it. Game formats are changing, slot formats are changing. They're becoming a lot more high-paced, high-hitting in terms of mechanical flow. And then you're also seeing the introduction now of more game show variants, where you look at even what Evo are doing on their live side. These are formats or gameplay formats that are starting to resonate with perhaps a more general, younger audience. And I think the industry needs to do that in order to capture the heart and minds of the future generation of players.
Well said. And Andy, from your own perspective, what are the kind of interesting formats that the Gen Zs are connecting with? We heard about game show formats there. What other competition is out there that the industry should be aware of, like from things like Xbox, from the fire hose of content that is Netflix, from these other platforms that are just these weapons of mass distraction? How do you cut through? How do you get that engagement? What kind of formats and design tricks should people be aware of?
Well, I think, look, I mean, there's so many. It depends on on the game type and
Sure.
and what we're talking about. Whether it's slots to free play to DFS to crash games. I think there's literally a whole slew of things that we can learn from other industries. Just to sort of follow on from Simon's point around innovation, there is a mandate for innovation in the market. But it's quite tricky just because of the way the market's constructed, and the risk point is really, really important. And it comes down to an individual level around gaming directors not wanting to put something that's totally risky on the front of their their site or their app, right at the top, that's going to challenge the norms if they're not going to get paid for that. So that in itself, the industry it struggles with true innovation in that way, and that's where you see, to answer your point, is you see this innovation coming from other areas which are less structurally or more structurally accepting of innovation. So crypto casinos or DFS or social gaming and these other areas. So gifting, sharing, all of these types of collaborative play, different types of animation, different types of sound, different types of device, different types of access point. All of those things are coming from some other areas where they don't have quite the same structural issues with innovation. There's more of a mandate to try them. We're particularly interested in what's happening in the crypto space just because of that, really.
Very good, absolutely. And you mentioned social games there, so this is an open question, anybody who wants to hop in. Talk to us a bit about the overlap of influencers. I mean, what do influencers mean in this space? Because they're very popular with the Zoomers, the Gen Zs. Brands are all over influencers to try and get some cut through, try and get that initial engagement and brand association. Is anybody here working with influencers? Have you seen some good examples? What does that mean in the industry? And how can it work? Is it a good idea for people to be thinking about using influencers? Ciara, you're nodding your head there.
Yeah, I I worked for Procter & Gamble when I graduated from university, so brand ambassadors has always been something, whether you're selling Gillette razors or, really nice shampoo, we always wanted to make sure that we had people that people aspired to be. And I think with influencers, it's slightly different. But, when it comes to things like streamers, for example, I don't think you need to be an influencer per se. I mean, when we look at even just that big win last night that we saw in Crazy Time with Evolution, I think had a streamer not been playing, then that wouldn't have spread as quickly and everyone wouldn't have heard about it maybe in the same way. So I think, very lucky rather than, trying to push the news out today. Sure. People pulled it through last night and were sharing and talking about it. And we also use brand ambassadors and influencers in our marketing in some of the regions, and it's a great way to target new audiences. Even just in Greece a few weeks ago, we went to the rally and, we had people for social media making content and really looking for distribution. And I think that's what people want to consume now. People don't want targeted ads on their Facebook sites from casinos that say sign up and deposit and get a €100 bonus anymore. They don't want just ads that talk about new games. They want genuine, engaging content. And I think even blogs are not just about SEO value anymore. They're about genuine ways to engage your customer. And in a world like Italy, where we have advertising bans, for example, or markets like Lithuania, where we need to follow that Sweden approach and stop bonusing, then finding new ways to continue to engage your customers is incredibly important.
Yeah, 100%. And a question for yourself, Ciara, opening up to the full panel. Do you think there's a hunger from the Gen Zs for authenticity? Because you said that people they can kind of see through personalized ads. If they're getting haunted around the internet with programmatic advertising, it's like, oh yeah, I know what's happening here. I visited this site, so I'm getting this, and yada yada. People are very sophisticated, but authenticity resonates. I mean, do you think that's true? And how do you think, can this be operationalized to take advantage of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not even just about authentic content, but almost the feeling that they've got there themselves and that they're in control of it. So, even if you spend all of your hours scrolling on Instagram or clicking from one story to the other or flowing through YouTube videos, they like to feel like they're in control of that journey, and sponsored content is not necessarily the way to do it. So if we look at the Betsson sponsorship of Copa America, for example,
Sure.
that moment when Messi realised that, they had won and the Betsson banners were in the background, that got seen by millions of people, and it's user-generated content and authentic content, as opposed to, that exposure was worth more to our brand than, any amount of media or PPC or ads that we could have run, because it was something customers were genuinely interested in, that they wanted to share with their friends. And, I've worked in the industry long enough to know that refer a friend's not going to change your business, right? But, when people have genuine content, they do want to share it, and they do want to do that with their friends and pass it on and talk about it as well, which is where the value comes from.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think. Sorry, just to jump in there. Sorry, I can't see everyone quite.
No, you're always welcome, Andy. Please, all of you.
Not speaking,
all good.
But I think it helps on where the context of the product is as well. In terms of that authentic thing. It's very difficult to make Rainbow Riches authentic to a Gen Z or whatever. But the context of where that appears, and where those people are accessing it from. So I guess that things like, we're hearing a change in narrative from North America. So to Ciara's point, exactly that, there's maybe that time for, targeted ads on Facebook with bonusing in Europe has come and gone. But the shift in narrative in the US is all around entertainment, and we see that, with some of these big deals being done in the sports sector, with Bally's or Penn buying the Score, or whatever it is that's going on, and that's more discussing. It's more dealing with gaming as an entertainment function. I know we would all consider it to be entertainment, right? But it's even more so than that. That narrative is coming on strong, and it's being reported. So when it becomes entertainment, then what does it sit alongside? You mentioned Netflix earlier. There's lots of different other types of entertainment that are vying for the future gamers' attention. And so the authenticity then could come from where we place the products within those other environments or opportunities they're in. It may be that operators of the future go way beyond their borders. If regulation allows, they're serving content beyond the borders of their own sites, for example, and they become a brand in their own right. And I know that some content providers are looking at that, right now. And so, yeah, that's quite an interesting aspect, I think.
Just to jump in a little bit, just on the other question about importance of streamers in the content landscape as a supplier. There's never now been a more direct media available to a supplier, to the end player. And especially ones creating awareness of your content. You're always reliant on the operator to do that. I think it's fair to say that the streamer community, the affiliate community, has probably had more impact on supplier preference or player supplier preference in the last 2 to 3 years than anything else. If you look at what's suppliers that wouldn't have even a window or a chance to grow versus the big boys on the market are now prevalent, popular, and growing and eating market share because of that impartial viewpoint, the streamer community, the actual community getting behind a specific supplier of content. That's been to the detriment of some of the more larger incumbent suppliers of recent years, which I think have had probably significant downturns, and actually smaller suppliers who have worked with these guys, who have done partnerships or created good content that has resonated with that community, have actually grown as a consequence. I mean, we took it quite seriously. We even did a collaboration with a streamer, with Casino Grounds as an example, to create an actual co-project where we're furthering those things, and we work quite closely with the guys. But there's a fine line there between creating engaging media, engaging following, and that impartiality. I have no problem having one of our games on a streamer, and if they say we don't like it, at the end of the day, that's still feedback, that's still qualified feedback, it's still visibility, awareness of your brand ultimately. Now, if you continuously come out with rubbish games, then that's going to have a detrimental impact to your portfolio, right? But it's huge influence now, and that is targeting and going into generation X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's about making sure that you're relevant, that your content is hitting the right mark, it's exciting, and people are hungry and eager to see what you come out with next. And I think new young suppliers who are in tune with that will continue to take share of pocket and revenues from the larger, more stale operations.
I think it will also be interesting to see how this kind of evolves over time, because will regulation kind of block the innovation in this area potentially? Like we've seen Twitch just recently, put some restrictions in place around gambling, and will that go further? It'd be interesting to watch.
Yeah, very good point,
Probably.
Amy. Probably. Yeah.
Fortunately.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
very market dependent as well, right? I mean,
yeah.
when we look at some of the emerging African continents, for example, where data is of a premium, they're not going to sit down and watch people play on streams, for example, versus trial the games. And, definitely in Scandinavian markets, that is huge. But in UK market, for example, where it's predominantly sports-based, then the average sportsbook customer isn't necessarily watching those either. And it's about finding and matching great content for those guys as well.
Yeah, well said. What a fast-moving, interesting space. And I'd like to come back to yourself for a moment, Amy. Now, of course, customer experience is your kingdom, and we've kind of hearing from everybody, yourself included, about how the customers are changing so rapidly. They've got changing expectations. We've got different markets. We've got the complications of regulation. We've got iGaming be seen as more of a kind of entertainment competitor, so you're kind of in that realm as well. Are there any kind of techniques or any technologies that you would recommend to keep tabs on the customer experience, to manage it across this increasingly hyper-fragmented marketplace? Do you use anything like personas and user journeys, or are there any particular platforms? I mean, if you are at liberty to divulge these things, or any general advice that you'd have for folks who are looking at this exploding, fast-moving, fragmented market, and they're thinking, my goodness, how can we ensure a great customer experience for this very demanding new demographic?
I think the fact that people are now becoming more aware of the value of customer experience, even though it's one of the hardest things to kind of put a value on. I think there was a recent research study that said that for every $1 spent on UX, it will return $100 in revenue.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to kind of to pin a value on it. But I think businesses are appreciating more and more that that it's absolutely essential. And it's not just user experience, it's the whole customer experience, it's the emotions that customers feel towards your brand around every single interaction that they have with it. And the fact that that's becoming more important, people are putting more focus on it, I think companies that will naturally invest more, so, they'll have bigger UX teams and, customer service, customer experience, product management teams. They'll also probably invest more in the tools to enable them to create a better customer experience. So, behavioral analytics tools, every website's got web analytics, but how many are actually diving into the behavioral analytics data, looking at, things like click rage and things where you're actually understanding not just what customers are doing, but why they're doing it.
Yeah.
I think, that little investments like that around, personalization, bringing more AI into all of our experiences, those will all help. And then technology-wise, I think 5G is going to be very interesting to see what kind of happens with the space, because essentially everything, will become much faster, more responsive. Hopefully, videos sticking will become a thing of the past, and it just opens things up more to kind of more innovation within gaming, and those streaming services that are all kind of flying at the moment. They'll be able to grow in markets where such as India and things like that. So it'll be an interesting space.
Totally. Yeah, fantastic. And what do we all think? A kind of, an open question. Whoever wants to jump in, feel free to jump in. What do we think all of this means for the quote-unquote traditional games? Do they still have a place? Do they need to have a new front end? Do they need to be represented by videos and streamers? Or is there still an appeal there for different demographics? Who'd like to jump in there? Simon?
I think there's still a very strong market for it. Suppliers and the casino business is still doing pretty well. As the guys have mentioned, like new emerging markets brings new levels of education and a new home for the more traditional slots to build people through. So there's definitely still a market for it, and there's definitely still a hunger and desire for those things. But I think as a supplier-led business, you need to be far more in tune with the actual framework that you're building, the dynamics of that to cope with the changes with regulated markets, the ability to adapt that effectively and quickly to new technology changes. I think there's been a big wake-up call for many suppliers in the recent years about how can you effectively modify your product, enhance your product over time to cater for the changes that are happening. So I think there's still generally a market for core slots, core casino games, but ultimately it's going to be the ones who can adapt those to the market conditions, regulatory conditions, new market entry, promotional suites, gamification suites that you need to put on top of these things to keep the experience engaging. Then it's going to be those guys who can still maintain a core product but can drive it forward, I think. Absolutely. Andy?
Yeah, I think that there's an old model, I think it was Toyota in the 80s, and that's 70-20-10, so 70% BAU, 20% evolution, 10% revolution, and we would like everyone to do a bit of that, but it's different types of evolution and revolution depending on whether you're on the supplier side as a content studio, in which case it's all around product development and understanding that future audience and creating products and games that are appealing to those people. And from an operator side, it's about solving some of the technology issues. So Amy, absolutely agree there that customer experience is absolutely critical, but we see lots of people that are really motivated to do good things in customer experience, but actually the technology holds them back, or sometimes even just the processes internally around data and how they've got plenty of data, but they're not really doing anything with it that improves the end-to-end customer experience, and that really goes all the way back to the integrations. And so if they can spend some more time, actually, if both parties could spend some more time on standardization of interface, APIs and talking to each other, that would help a lot in terms of improving that customer experience. And it would also help with things like personalization and those elements that we were talking about before. There'd be a lot more opportunity. It's just ever so complex technically,
Absolutely, my goodness. Well, we live in a world of fast-moving technology, APIs, 5G, streamers, influencers, traditional games, next-level advanced video games. It's very, very exciting times, but that is, I'm afraid, all the time we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our fantastic panellists, Ciara McLean, Amy Casson-Hughes, Andy Rogers, and Simon Hammon. Thank you so much all for joining us.